It's my pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker, Professor Grace Davie. Grace Davie is a renowned sociologist of religion and Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of Exeter in the UK. She has held visiting posts at leading institutions such as the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales and Uppsala University. Grace Davie's research focuses on the sociology of religion, particularly the changing patterns of religion in Europe and the theoretical paradigms that have emerged in this field. On a more practical level, Davie has explored the interactions between religion and welfare and religion and healthcare, recognizing the implications of these diverse areas for sociological thinking about religion. Her recent publications include the Oxford Handbook of Religion in Europe and Religion in Britain, a Persistent Paradox. We welcome Professor Grace Davie.
Thank you for your welcome, and thank you for looking after me so well. And you certainly had me covered in terms of how I got here and how well I was introduced, and my hotel is so good and so near and all the rest of it. So let's get started. I don't think I'm quite as good as the choir, but never mind. I'm very well aware that I'm standing between you and a reception, so I will not delay. But I'm going to start with two preliminary remarks just to set the scene of what I'm going to do. First, I want to say, how do I understand religion? Now, this is not a definition. It's simply saying that any definition must consider the power of religious ideas to motivate, of religious practices to shape ways of life, of religious communities to mobilize and extend the reach of social changes, and of religious leaders and symbols to legitimate calls to action. Religion, put differently, is a powerful force, for good or for ill. I could give you examples of each. I'm going to leave the for ill. We'll get to that in due course. If you want a really good example of a religion extending the good, look in the 2015 volumes of Nature, the premier scientific journal of our time, when Laudato Si was published. Google Hope from the Pope to find the leader that this journal wrote about the encyclical. The science was good, but the point was the dissemination through the Catholic Church was better, enviable, something no scientific academy could possibly achieve. I didn't expect to read that in my career, and it has stayed with me since. Think about it. What do I fear in terms of religion? I fear two things. One is religion that has been co-opted by the state. Russia is a good example, but there are many others. I also fear a state that has suppressed or eliminated religion. China, for example. The place of religion in a democracy is central. If there is no place in a society for seriously held religion, it is not a democracy. We'll come back to that point. My second remark. In my professional life, which is quite long now, there's been a long-term shift in the understanding of religion and secularization in Europe. I'll take you back to the 1960s, the year in which I started my PhD, in which we understood secularization very much as the time when the public spheres of Western societies were deemed to be secular spaces. We expected the state, schools, welfare systems, healthcare to be primarily, not totally, but primarily secular. We equally argued that religion would persist in private lives. I studied at the London School of Economics, an institution created to determine and work through the secular philosophy of science that would underpin a modern secular state. I was very aware of this at the time. What do I see around me now, some 60 years later? Religion is ebbing away from private lives. The nuns are growing all around us. But religious diversity, which has already been mentioned several times this afternoon, has raised rather than diminished the profile of religion in public debate. The consequences of this reversal are something that I really want to bring to your attention. They're not very pretty. I will conclude with a short postscript of intimations of further change. To get myself from where we are now to where I want to be in half an hour's time, I'm going to take as a kind of linking thread Tomáš Halik's work in The Afternoon of Christianity, The Courage to Change. This was published in 2024 in English. It's a little sooner in Czech, possibly in German too. I know Tomáš Halik is much better known in this part of the world than he is in Britain. So forgive me if I'm telling you things you already know, but I find it very helpful for my argument. What I really want to do after we've introduced that is to show you two moments in Europe. First, that around the turn of the millennium, that's around 2000, and then the changes that have taken place since and the reasons for these, which I'm beginning to explore. I wrote an article in 2023. All these references will be on the final slide, which you can look at when I've finished, in which two things are held together, and this is absolutely central. Continuing and at times remorseless secularization alongside growing religious diversity. I see many studies which do one or the other. I don't see many that consider them together and in so doing raise new and challenging questions. So here's Tomáš Halik. In the interests of our reception, I'm going to take the second of these quotes, which is shorter, and it'll be, it does say more or less what the first one does, so you can read them both if you like. But the whole point of this is that questions about God and the essence of man, which are normal, natural questions in the human condition, demand plausible, meaningful, and intelligible answers in the context of a particular culture and historical situation. I am not saying that this situation determines what we consider to be religion. I'm simply saying that no religion, no truth claim can exist outside of a human situation, which is a context. And to understand what is happening, we need to understand that context. What I want you to grasp about Europe today is contradictions and complexities. The current spiritual situation can be variously described as a decline of religion. We hear plenty about that. A crisis of faith, that too. A crisis of the church, a religious and spiritual renaissance, a return of religion, but not always where we want it. A transformation of religion into spiritualities or into ideologies of political identity. We see a pluralization of religion and an individualization of faith and opportunities for new evangelism, all at the same time. This is not one simple story. This is not only a contradictory and complex story, but it's continually evolving. Our work is never done. How can we make sense of it across space and across time? I will concentrate on the European case. Of course, you could do it on many others. So here's my first slide explaining how I understood and understand religion in Europe. The article was published in 2006. It's been quite widely read. It's retrospective, so turn of the millennium, the 1990s is okay. This is what I was talking about. And I see, if you will pardon the analogy, I see religion in Europe like a lasagna. I say this because it's layered. Now, if I were to speak about religion in the US, I would say it's a cake, because it's slices. And I used to use this for teaching, and my students used to go lasagna, cake. And I see them years later, and they say, I still remember the lasagna and cake. The bottom layer in Europe is cultural heritage. It's the basic ways we think. Think about time in Europe. Think about space. Time is Christian time. Weeks, weekends, holidays, festivals. These are very basic, and mostly we don't even reflect on them. And I can say to my students, why do you stay in bed on Sunday? And they say, well, because we have no classes. Well, why Sunday? They won't, most of them, be able to tell me why. They will get Christmas and Easter, but they've lost Pentecost. And yet, in much of Europe, the shops are shut. We're all caught out by holidays in other people's countries, but they often are marked by Christian festival, even in the most secular places like France. Space. Vienna is a wonderful example. Look across a European city, you see a Christian skyline. You know when you're moving out of Europe because your skyline changes. And there are many mosques and temples and gurdwaras and other buildings in Europe now, but it's a little delicate to place these in certain places of our cities. Think of the mosque in the center of Oxford in the UK, in England. Wonderful case studies, because research studies could be done on the resistance to the planning application, the letters that arrived in the planning office to resist that building. There's evidence there of how we think about our skylines. And then the second layer is what I call vicarious religion. I've worked quite a bit on this. And it's effectively the inherited parochial model which operates like a public utility. It is there for us all when we need it. There at the point of need, the parish church. And again, you need to remember it is a geographical model. We have states, we have state churches, we have dioceses, which are have geographical entity, and we have parishes. And the parish is the building block of European society, whether civic or ecclesiastical. It's there at the point of need, and I regarded this when I was first working on it, 1990s onwards, as a kind of benign presence that was losing its purchase. My generation understood what it meant, my children didn't, and I really thought that this would probably fade as a memory, and yet we still turn back to it when things go badly wrong. We still expect it to be there for a difficult occasion, for a funeral that the community wants to celebrate. You go to your parish church or to your cathedral. There's expectation there. There's something of a kind of contract, implicit contract. Over this grows increasingly a shift from obligation into a market in religion. This is what we mean about the kind of fragmentation of religion, markets of all kinds, big churches, little churches, individual places, grand places, mega churches, the whole lot, part of a market. A newer model. It is the marketization of religion, which is much, much more developed in the US, which didn't have the territorial model, remember. Rather less here, though it's developed much faster in parts of Europe than others. Markets are fine. Markets have gainers and losers. Everybody likes it when they're the gainer. They're not so happy when they're the losers. This market was extending all the time as new arrivals came to Europe. Some of them were Christian. Into the UK, for example, came many Africans and many people from the West Indies who enlivened our Christian churches no end. But this market extended to faiths other than Christian, and it goes in West Europe in this period in 3 waves. The economic expansion post-Second World War requires new labor, new sources of labor. Britain, France, the Netherlands, the then West Germany, mostly look to their former colonies to resource this market. That expands dramatically in the 1990s because of economic growth. And then you get this very unfortunate acronym, which is PIGS, I do apologize, which is Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. No disrespect to any of those wonderful countries, where they had been exporting labor much longer in the post-war period, and then suddenly, in the turn of the period in the 1990s, they become attracting new labor. They grow rapidly as economies, and migrants begin to flow into those parts of Europe as well from various parts of the world. Ireland, which is another I, is a wonderful example. In the flick of an eyelid, Dublin changed from a poor city, mostly sending people away, to a hip, developing, stylish, desirable place for particularly stagnites. That was an extraordinarily quick turnaround. And then the last change in this period, remember I'm not quite up to now, is 2004, the enlargement of the European Union, when East Europeans began to move west, or people further east began to move west. And for example, 1 million Poles came to Britain, which was a huge injection and very much changed the Catholic Church, the Catholic minority in my own country. Secular alternatives were growing fast. Secular alternatives, of course, were quite aggressive. This is the time of Richard Dawkins, the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, New Atheism, and it was aggressive. At times vehement. It was quite disturbing in many ways. And it was also the time when I was beginning to talk about Europe as an exceptional case in global terms. Europe was the secular heart, if you like, but it was not necessarily the case that as the rest of the world modernized, it would necessarily secularized, though it was hard to convince Europeans that was the case. Now, this is substantially similar. It's the same set of issues, but I want to just gloss them a little bit to show you how they're moving against each other. The yellow ones are the ones that move. Cultural heritage is still there. We have not eradicated our past, but the skyline continues to alter. You can look across cities and begin, beginning to change. This is not quite from another faith, but there's a very, very prominent Orthodox building in central Paris, which you see from the river. It's very striking. Now, vicarious religion, here, in my view, there's a noticeable and unexpected, for me, and negative shift. This inherited memory is becoming increasingly religion as an identity rather than a faith community or a commitment. It is majoring on exclusion rather than inclusion. And so you begin to say to the newcomer, not come and share our heritage, but are you or are you not one of us? And you begin to feel this weaponization of a heritage. And there's examples of that in different parts of Europe. some quite discreet, some less so, and some in unexpected places like the Nordic countries, which I did not expect to see. The market continues to grow, including, of course, many examples of other faith communities. We have again the gainers and the losers. But when we go to the new arrivals, we have a fourth and hugely consequential wave. This is coming from the war in Syria in 2015, and it seems to have triggered a seemingly unstoppable and politically consequential wave. If you look at the earlier ones, they tend to dip when the economy dips. They're very much driven by the need for labor. And when a recession comes, the migration diminished. That is not happening now. And every single European society has this very, very high up on their agenda. The secular alternatives are intriguing me. Think of Richard Dawkins. Very much the expression, the embodiment of new atheism, if you like. He now styles himself a cultural Christian. What does he mean? What does he mean? I think he means he'd rather be Christian or in a Christian culture than a Muslim one, I'm afraid. I also see Ayaan Hirsi Ali convert. I didn't expect to see that, and her husband and family. And there's a very prominent journalist in the UK called Giles Coren, who is Jewish in background. And he wrote quite a widely read piece on Ash Wednesday, at the beginning of Lent this year. And what did he say? What am I giving up for Lent this year? I'm giving up atheism. And it was a very interesting article in the way that he developed. This is quite personal, very touching. His son has made his way to an Anglican church. Giles, the father, has gone with him and finds himself very attracted to this expression of Christianity. What it says about his background as an Orthodox Jew is also interesting. His Jewish friends suggested he became a more liberal Jew, and he said, no, that won't cut it. I commend that to you. You can find that quite easily by Googling. And finally, I've altered, or I think the situation's altered, but I see it differently. Instead of seeing Europe as an exceptional case, I see it now as a distinctive case, which means that I see it as probably the most secular part of the world, though many others are catching up in some ways. But I don't see it as exceptional to a single other. I mean, there are many, many different ways of considering modernity. And it was at this point that I began to think much harder about the notion of multiple modernities, which I think is a very useful and effective tool. In short, what we find here are contradictory pressures. More than one thing is happening at once. Secularization is growing steadily. The nuns are increasing in most parts of Europe. But so too is religious diversity, as I've said, driven mostly, largely, by immigration. And it's this, in my view, that is pushing to the marked rise in populism, often, though not always, associated with conservative and intolerant forms of religion. Sometimes it can be very secular, as in France, as in the kind of gesture which insists on very strict dress codes for Muslim women, particularly what they can and can't wear on the beach, which is a sort of reverse version of it. In other words, they're asking people to take things off all the time rather than on, which is not usually the problem on a beach. Culturalized religion is growing, or heritage, I hate this word, heritage, never mind, heritage, religion as heritage, in which you are considering something that is ours, and rather than offering it as a gift, you are saying it's exclusive. You are not saying to the newcomer, let us welcome the stranger. You are saying you are not one of us. And this collusion of certain kinds of politics and certain kinds of religion, I will develop in just a moment, but I want to do one or two other things first. If you look carefully, you see secularization leads to eroding practice and eroding belief. It leads further, deeper, more worryingly, to an inability to comprehend what it means to be religious. But at the same time, this growing religious diversity prompts the return of religion to the public sphere, to public debate, provoking some very sharp reactions. How are we going to manage this? And what emerges is an ill-informed and ill-mannered debate. And this, I think, is something that is all around us, not helpful, potentially dangerous, and needs attention. And I feel a conference like this is the place where we address this issue and find ways to mitigate it. I think that's what we are doing. I think this is what this European Academy of Religion should have at the front of its mind, is how do we make this public conversation about religion better? Whether you're in the classroom, whether in political life, whether you're teaching, whether you are in civil service or whatever, it has to improve. Policy implications are huge right across society, in the workplace, in education, in healthcare, and in foreign policy. How on earth are you going to conduct intelligent foreign policy in most parts of the world if you do not know anything about religion? You cannot do it. So the crucial importance of religious education, the crucial importance of teaching education in religion in the university, in your center, improving religious literacy. And I would even say, I don't know whether it's applying to many of you, but I would even say it is a responsibility of all preachers to do this. They really can make a difference. You do not collude in this ill-mannered debate. You counteract it. You inform yourself, you inform your congregation, you inform your classroom, and you let them practice effective debate. More to do as well. These publications at the top here are just one example of many where quite a lot of them are being published now, is where you are getting close analyses of Christianity in particular, colluding or getting too close to the far right. And then the second of the two is a sort of is kind of volume 2 of the first one. It develops examples which are, I find extremely interesting. And this is the question that I want to raise with you, which I find, I ask myself. I don't know that I've got the answer. How should mainstream churches regard their more extreme brethren, I include the women, and to what extent are they responsible for these extreme actions and beliefs? Now, I see all around me, and I am tempted to do the same. Nothing to do with us. This is Christianism. This is not Christianity. We don't think like that. They're different. I think we have a responsibility. If you stand in that place as a mainstream Christian, you may not. That's not what I'm here for. But I do see that all of us have to take responsibility for this collusion on the extreme right. At the very least, we have to understand why it is happening. Why is there a populist backlash? What is it in our societies that are making people feel anxiety? Why is it that people are so anxious to repel the stranger? And why is it that they are deploying religion to do this? We have to begin to understand this. We can't just say it's nothing to do with us. And I take an example from the UK. It was fueled a little bit by the riots that happened just a year ago, last summer, which horrified me and many others. It was a very unpleasant event. A young man who was clearly mentally ill got into a dance class, stabbed 3 children, or stabbed several children, 3 died. And one person on social media wrongly said this young man was a Muslim. He wasn't. He was clearly ill, but he was not a Muslim. And the reaction was horrific in terms of attacks on Muslim communities, churches, all kinds of mindless violence broke out for a good 2 weeks. It was very disturbing. So how do we deal with this? Because we can't say in a modern democracy that you cannot vote for a right-wing party, you cannot vote for Brexit, foolish though it may be, you cannot vote for Reform, which is Nigel Farage, and you have your equivalents. That's part of a democratic order. It's part of our democracy. But you cannot set light to a hotel that houses migrants. That is unacceptable in a democracy. But where do we draw the line? Mindful that both gestures are, at least in part, motivated by Islamophobia. I'll leave you with a question, but I will say that in this episode, we saw the best of our society as well as, I might say, ordinary people came out in their thousands to clear up the mess and to protect their Muslim communities in towns and villages all over the north of England. So it's complex, but I think it's the capacity, the imagination to understand the disillusionment of certain sections of our population and to see how that can be ameliorated. I think we're all responsible for that. So back to Tomáš Halik. How can we move on from the current crisis, both within the churches and outside? He invites in his last chapter a moving on to a self-transcendence of Christianity, to what he calls a new Reformation. And absolutely central to this is where I'm coming back to where I started about what I feared, is he sees in Christianity particularly a community of listening and understanding, of somebody who will, groups of people who will wait and think, of generosity, kindness, and welcome, all the welfare things that the previous speaker told us that the churches do so well. They do indeed. And churches are particularly good at anything that requires labor, because labor in the churches is free. I mean, it needs careful management, but that's manpower alongside the less able or the ones that simply are lonely. That's where you will find the best volunteers. I also want to commend to you what I think is an excellent book, you may know it already, which is Hartmut Rosa's Democracy Needs Religion. And again, this is Hartmut Rosa is a distinguished social theorist. You probably know that because you're German speakers, you know more than I do. And he writes fearsome books on social theory and analyses of late modern societies, which are not reassuring. This Democracy Needs Religion was a short essay that started life as an address to a diocesan conference in the Catholic Church in Germany. And it rests on God give us a listening heart. Now, you may not go with the phrase of a biblical quote in that, but I do commend the notion that a democracy should have places to listen, the right to listen, as well as to speak. Now, in this, he puts alongside churches, religion, music. And I find that a very attractive combination. So I bring myself back to the possible way out of the dilemma of the extremes of either suppressing religion or co-opting it. It's giving religion the space in a European society, and others, of course, to allow the debate to take place. And good debate involves listening as well as speaking. But why did Tomáš Halik say the afternoon of the church? Does the afternoon not lead to the evening, to extinction, and to death? I thought it a bit odd until I got to the final sentence. In the biblical concept of time, a new day begins in the evening. Let us not miss the moment when the first star appears in the evening sky. Are there any stars? I'm going to be just a little bit provocative, stick my neck out. I thought of two. The first, I was intrigued by global reaction to the death of Pope Francis, to the conclave, and to the election of Pope Leo. The whole world stopped and looked at these events. Why? Why? Are they looking for something beyond the usual presidential election, which is a little less edifying? Is this evidence for or evidence against secularization? And the image that stays in my mind is President Trump and President Zelensky sitting on two chairs, much less comfortable than the ones we're sitting on, in the middle of St. Peter's, having a conversation. Space to listen, perhaps? Finally, this is a very recent publication in the UK. It's called The Quiet Revival. And what this inquiry finds is Gen Z, the youngest generation above children, leading a rise, this is what it claims, leading a rise in church attendance, especially among men. Now that really is a turn up for the books, if it is true. Now, it's a perfectly competent piece of work done by a polling agency. The publication is done by an evangelical group, so maybe they've glossed it, I don't know. Certainly my colleagues who are strong on quantitative analyses of religion say, I'm sorry, but this is just not right. It can't be right. No other study is finding the same thing. This is an exaggeration. It isn't so. And these are people I respect, I know well, I debate with over many years. The thing that makes me think twice is that exactly at the same time I read in the French press a rise in the number of young people being baptized in the Catholic Church. Now that did startle me a little. That's not really what I expect. And then I read again, and this is an American example, but there are echoes of it at home as well. There's still anecdotal echoes of young men or young married men turning to the Orthodox Church, where they're finding good models of how it is to be a man. But they are rather traditional models of how it is to be a man. It's a reassertion in some ways of the traditional male role. I'm keeping my eyes open, and I'm asking you, is this true? Is this significant? Is it benign, or is it simply another form of populism, in which case it's less welcome? Will it last? Now, one thing is for sure, it will not be me or my generation that does the work here. I'm coming to the end of my career, much as I have enjoyed it. I know that. I can look back to the 1960s. I'm not going to look forward to the 2030s and 40s. There are many of you here who will do just that. I wish you very well in your careers. I hope you find them as fulfilling and enjoyable as my own. But first, I wish you the best of conferences where this conversation can begin in earnest. Thank you so much for your attention.